7 military time, and the moon will be in Capricorn, and the sun will be in Cancer. So during the full moon, the aspects that I wrote down here, and I wanted to try something a little different. Generally, I try to wing it so I can test my memory. However, this time I decided to take notes on my lecture today instead of winging it all the time. I only wing it because I delight in testing my memory capabilities, which for me can be quite challenging considering the fact that I have been blessed/cursed with the Pisces ascendant. And with the Pisces ascendant, everything is a mission. Trust me. And my Mercury is retro with Uranus on my midheaven. And aside from my 27-degree Sun in Sagittarius in conjunction with Neptune on the galactic center, and aside from the point that I'm highly narcissistic, vain, and OCD, I decided to take notes. And the notes that I take are from some of the books that I own and other research that I've committed to memory. However, everything that I use out of books, I'll reference, and also everything that I use out of books, I just formulate my own wisdom, everything that I've learned, and I make sure that the notes that I take are in my own words. Okay, aside from that, the full moon, they will be a kite with the North Node, Sun, South Node, and Neptune. They will also be another kite with the North Node, Mercury, South Node, and Neptune. Also, there will be a bisextile with the North Node, Sun, and Neptune. And there will be a grand trine with the South Node, Sun, and Neptune. There will be a bisextile with the North Node, Moon, and Neptune. And there will be a T-square finally with the North Node, South Node, and Saturn. So let's talk about what these aspects are, what they do with the full moon. So, a kite, this is how I describe a kite. A kite are 3 trine aspects, including several planets. A trine aspect is 120 degrees, approximately, give or take the orb, and denotes possibilities of furthering a cause or meeting one's goal with more ease. For example, like a kite that has caught wind and is sailing steadily towards a desired outcome. A kite gliding effortlessly towards the prize or treasure. It also includes 2 sextiles, which are roughly 60 degrees and on opposition, through the trine and sextiles being soft aspects. The opposition is considered a hard aspect, and the opposition splits the kite in 2 separate parts. And the bisextile. So let's talk about what a bisextile is now. So a bisextile aspect is an aspect that consists of 1 trine and 2 sextiles. The trine aspect comes with more ease in comparison to the sextiles. The sextile occurs between signs that are of a different element, but are of the same masculine or feminine principle. The trine influences an effortless flow, while the sextile portions synthesize and triggers a reactive quality within the aspect that results in taking action with a map down a clear path forward with inspiration. So now let's go to a grand trine. So a grand trine, this is how I describe a grand trine. A grand trine are 3 trines, 120 degrees, in aspect to the signs of the same element generally. Keeping in mind that the geometry trumps. Its expressive quality is obsolete and highly beneficial. However, it could have the potential to be taken for granted. So now let's talk about a T-square. A T-square is, or are, two squares with 90-degree angles, or aspects that coincide with a 180-degree opposition. This is considered to be a hard aspect. The square aspects are a necessary push, with a capital P, from the universe in order to rise above certain limitations. Overcoming an obstacle will open the path up to a new dynamic and experiences the soul yearns for. The opposition energy can feel like, quote, "You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't," end quote. Its hidden blessing is awareness, equating in personal growth. So that is the full moon. So now for the signs, the full moon, and we'll start with Aries. The full moon is occurring between the axis of your 10th house of Capricorn and 4th house of Cancer. Also, another thing to note with the full moon is the moon is conjunct Pluto retrograde and the sun is conjunct Mercury. Also, Neptune is retrograde, and Neptune retrograde is sextile the moon and Pluto retrograde. And it is trining the sun and Mercury. So another thing to note with this full moon occurring for you Aries is the North Node and Uranus trines the moon and Pluto retrograde. And another aspect that I will talk about later when I get back to my house is the North Node and Uranus sextile the sun and Mercury. So right now I'm just going over the aspects, the major focus for each sign and where it's occurring for each sign. And then when I get home later, I'll give a further description of what it means for you. Right now I'm just focusing on where it's taking place in your chart and emphasis on the aspects. So for Taurus, the full moon is occurring between the axis of your 9th house of Capricorn and 3rd house of Cancer. For Gemini, the full moon is occurring between the axis of your 8th house of Capricorn and your 2nd house of Cancer. For Cancer, your full moon is occurring between the axis of your 7th house of Capricorn and your 1st house of Cancer. For Leo, your full moon is occurring between the axis of your 6th house of Capricorn and your 12th house of Cancer. For Virgo, your full moon is occurring between the axis of your 5th house of Capricorn and your 11th house of Cancer. For Libra, your full moon is occurring between the axis of your 4th house of Capricorn and your 10th house of Cancer. Now for Scorpios, your full moon is occurring between the axis of your 3rd house of Capricorn and your 9th house of Cancer. For Sagittarius, your full moon is occurring between the axis of your 2nd house of Capricorn and your 8th house of Cancer. For Capricorn, your full moon is occurring between the axis of your 1st house of Capricorn, house of Self, and your 7th house of Cancer. For Aquarius, your full moon is occurring between the axis of your 12th house of Capricorn and your 6th house, which is ruled by Cancer. For Pisces, your full moon is occurring between the axis of your 11th house of Capricorn and your 5th house of Cancer. After we have discussed the full moon, we are going to the new moon, which the new moon is occurring in Leo, and it's happening Thursday, July the 28th at 17:54 military time. So the full moon, or excuse me, the new moon will include these following aspects. It's going to include grand crosses and several T-squares. So the first grand cross is going to be with Uranus, Mercury, the South Node, and Saturn. The second grand cross is the North Node, Mercury, South Node, and Saturn. So the first T-square is Mars, Mercury, South Node. And then we have another T-square including Uranus, Mercury, and Saturn. And then we have another T-square that includes Uranus, Mercury, and the South Node. Then followed by 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth T-square is with the North Node, Mercury, and Saturn. The fifth T-square is with the North Node, Mercury, and the South Node. And the sixth T-square is with Mercury, South Node, and Saturn. The seventh T-square is Uranus, South Node, and Saturn. And the eighth final T-square is with the North Node, South Node, and Saturn. So let's talk about what the Grand Cross means. So here I describe the Grand Cross. A Grand Cross consists of 4 squares, 90 degrees approximately, and 2 oppositions, approximately 180 degrees. The Grand Cross occurs when there is massive tension between the signs that all correlate with the same modality. However, the signs' element are different. In my opinion, the Grand Cross represents the spiritual soul essence of the energy permeating inward at a deep level, creating a crystallus condition that imposes a traumatic, catalyzing transformation of some sort. You fill in the blank. The reason why I describe it this way is because when I look at a grand square or a grand cross, it is literally a 4 solid wall cross, the target in the center, and it makes me feel as if it's matter on the cross that has nothing, or it cannot do anything but be bound to this cross for the universe to apply pressure to, for it to basically be forced to change. And wherever this is going on within your chart, you can apply the scenario to that area of your life where you feel the pressure, where you feel you're on a cross, where you feel you have nowhere to turn but to surrender, basically, and trust the process, no matter how difficult it feels. Because the end result ultimately is transformation of some sort, and a needed one. So now a T-square. Again, the T-square are 2 square 90-degree angles or aspects that coincide with a 180-degree opposition. This is considered to be a hard aspect. The square aspects are a necessary push with a capital P from the universe in order to rise above certain limitations. Overcoming an obstacle will open a path up to new dynamics or experiences the soul yearns for. The opposition energy can feel like, quote, "You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't," end quote. Its hidden blessing, however, is awareness, equating in personal growth, which is very much needed. So the soft aspects are ones that you can ease into as far as like feng shui. If you create angles and, energy that merges, it's much more harmonious. And hard aspects are really basically square edges, things that come to a confrontation where there's going to be a tough decision to be made, or there's going to be some sort of collision of some sort that needs to be brought into our focus or attention in order to adjust. A call for action, basically. So, for Aries, the sign of Aries, the new moon will happen in your 5th house in Leo, conjunct Mercury. And another aspect to note that I will talk to you about further when I get to back to my house is Jupiter retrograde trine your new moon in the 1st house of Aries and Leo, your 5th house. So for Taurus, the new moon is occurring in your 4th house of Leo, and it's conjunct Mercury. Also, another aspect I will mention is Jupiter retrograde in Aries, your 12th house, trining your new moon in Leo, which is happening in your 4th house. So now Gemini, your new moon is occurring in your 3rd house of Leo, and it's conjunct Mercury. And then Jupiter retrograde is going on in your 11th house of Aries, trining the new moon in Leo, your 3rd house. So for Cancer, the new moon is occurring in your 2nd house of Leo, conjunct Mercury, and Jupiter's retrograding in Aries, trining your new moon in your 10th house of Leo. And for Leo, your new moon is occurring in your 1st house, house of self, conjunct Mercury. And Jupiter is retrograding in Aries, your 9th house, trining your new moon in your 1st house, Leo. So for Virgo, the new moon